Hey, it's Ewan from Q-SYS Australia, formerly known as TAG. So I still work for TAG, but part of TAG now operates as Q-SYS Australia, obviously with permission from QSC. If you don't know who we are, we handle all distribution, tech support, etc. in Australia and have done since Q-SYS was launched. So for those of you that have been messaging me over the last couple of years asking for this file, since we showed a video of it a couple of years ago, it's changed a little bit since then. I do apologize. I promised I would clean up the code and the CSS and make some changes and release it, and of course never found the time. So the reason is that this code is pretty heavy. So there's almost 2,000 lines of code running this UCI. So it's a decent task to go through and actually clean all of it up. The CSS is pretty involved as well. So don't judge any of this code. I haven't had a chance to go through and clean any of it up. But if I keep waiting for that, you'll never get it. So I figure I'm just going to release it as is. Now, caveat for this, we built this for a trade show. It's never been used in an actual production environment, so it is completely use at your own risk. Feel free to just use it and find out how we're doing some stuff if that's what you want. If you do want to use it, then you're going to have to test it, because obviously we're not going to be available to just sort of do tech support on it or anything like that. So it's completely use at your own risk. Of course, if you find some obvious things, please feel free to post it on communities, and if I can get to it, I will. Now, you're free to use this however you want. We just ask that you don't sell it as a package or anything like that, but certainly if you're doing integration works, use any part of this. We own all of the graphics. Our lovely Nicole in our marketing department illustrated all of the graphics. The previous one that I showed was just some random Shutterstock images. So we've built the new graphics ourselves in-house, so you can use them however you want to. We have added some cool new features to it with UCI variables, which I'll show, but I'll give you a little bit of a rundown. So the whole thing runs off UCI script and CSS, so it is portable, but you will need to understand how named components work. So this all just talks back to named components. So I jump back into my design here. You can see all of our named components. If you don't know about script programmer mode, if you're using named components, you definitely should. So there, usually you would hover over these and see their named component names, but you can't see when you're online what you gave script access to or all access to, etc. But if you are in script programmer mode, you can see that. So these little yellow squares with an S, that means it's got script access. So you can see they've got a little status block. I've got 5 game blocks, a room volume, it's just called volume, mic 1, mic 2, mic 3, and a room mic. We've got some cameras, camera router, video bridge, ACPR, the decoder, which in this system is just running off a MV32 in core mode, VoIP phone, MTR, HID block, call sync. The lights is not a lighting controller, it's a selector, just mimicking some stuff on the touch panel. We've got a UCI layer controller, which we're really just using to pull down names and sort them in the script. We've got a coffee ordering system that we use on all of our trade show stands. We've got some webhook integration. So I'll go ahead and start this up. This is just rendering an SVG for the dial if you haven't seen any of the SVG stuff that we've done before. This little status checker is purely just for looks. It's not actually checking anything. I think I attempted to bring it, well, I certainly had it on the plan to tie it up to the status block in the design file, but I don't think I ever got around to it. So of course we're presented with a little welcome page. We can click on this. Kind of ironic that, this trade show we've just done, I spent the whole time talking about no touch control and automating all of this stuff in the back end and how to do it with Q-SYS. But if you want to decide what you're doing on the touch panel, then this is the page for you. So we can go in here. Let's flick a Teams meeting. So this is just changing the sources We can see here we've got the teams sources going to our displays. Now, the way that you assign the displays is done here. So the display 1 source, the display 2 source, and again, you need to know how to use name components. If you've never used them before, if we go in here and we have a look at this and we click on a decoder, we can see this is the code name that we're using to select AV1. You know, you've got HDMI 1, 2, 3, MediaCast, all that sort of stuff. So it's just this last section. Obviously, we've got this first bit coded, hard-coded in, and then we can just change that. So if you're wiring up to different inputs on the MV32, that's the part you need to modify in the script to make it work. Now, everything that's talking to a name component in this design uses state triggers. So if you're not familiar with them, a state trigger, I hit the button, it just sends out a trigger. It's not a Boolean value. It sends a trigger. It then talks back to the actual component that it's controlling. The script then reads the feedback from the device, and then it assigns a value to the button, and then that value is rendered using CSS. So what it means is when I hit, if these were just toggles, if there's something broken in my script, I'd think that I'd be changing it, and it wouldn't be doing it on the MV32. But if these buttons are changing in color, you know that it's actually talking to the MV32 because it's actually doing that based off feedback. And you can see here that if I go and change this, it's reading that as well. So you got two-way sync. So you can play around in the design file and the UCI will sync. Now, one of the cool things we added is the ability to dynamically change some of this stuff. So we can choose our sources. We can relabel these dynamically as well. We can do the same thing with the cameras. We can do it with a number of displays. And one really cool thing, if we look at our menu down here, we can do, let's say you're not using VoIP, because very many people are these days. If I uncheck that box, you can see the phone controls there has disappeared, but the menus is actually all bunched up again. So we're not just using is invisible, because then you're left with gaps in your menu. So what we're actually doing is reassigning these down here and here. Okay, so we're actually dynamically reassigning the CSS icon and what those buttons are actually doing based on these. So you can see there it's still going to the right spots. If I didn't want coffee in here as well, I can turn that off, and again they're still going to the right spots, and both of those have disappeared. So that's kind of cool. You can also change the colors, the color scheme, so on the fly. So if you want to grab a different color, now just be wary. If you grab a color out of Designer in the regular way you would, it won't work here, because Designer actually puts the transparency values at the front. So you need to actually take them, just grab a little notepad thing and stick them on the back, and then it'll work. You can see there that's reassigned. So you can do that for the button colors, and then you can also do it independently for the icons down the bottom. So I'm going to change that back. All right, so we can get the camera previews on HDMI 1. Now we'll look at the camera stuff. Obviously everything's disabled because we have ACPR doing our camera tracking, but we turn that off and now we've got manual controls. So we can flick between our cameras. We've got the preview of the 30 frame a second preview on there that we can switch between cameras. Now one cool bit of logic in here, if we go, this is switched to an NC110, and if I zoom it all the way out, this is just emulating at the moment, it tells you that it disables the pan controls because on an NC110, when it's zoomed all the way out, they don't work until you zoom in because it's digital. So it just means that you're not pressing buttons going, why isn't it working? And then as you zoom in, those controls become available. Now we've got a little phone controller here. I haven't done a VoIP system in a long time, but it's there if you need it. Works very similar to the way an iPhone works. And then, so now we're in a call. You can see here that it actually lets us know that we're still in a call. So we can click in there, get back to it, and hang up. You can see it actually formats some numbers. If I go and put in a actual number, you can see it's starting to format the numbers. That's based on Australia, so you can change that. That's down in the code. You can actually change the formatting of that based on your region. Now the coffee ordering system, this is something that we use at our trade shows and in our office, but we can dial up some coffees in here. And then what happens is they actually show on this little barista window when they're ready. Usually, we do that and they show up on a big, nice screen on the trade show floor, and then people come and collect them. And then when they're done, hit done, and then they're obviously removed from the queue. So lighting control, again, that's just a selector, so there's nothing fancy going on there. The mic controls, you can of course relabel this stuff on the, if you call it a lav mic instead of a lapel, you can relabel that. You can do whatever you want with those. And hide them as well. The ceiling mic is just a regular old mute for your ceiling mic, obviously tied back to HID. I think I tied it back to the HID controller. I can't quite remember. But you can see there that the icon's following down the bottom as well. So if you're not in the page, you can see that the ceiling mic, at least the room mic, is muted. Now if we go to our volume control here, we can see we get a nice big sort of SVG render there. And something that's, maybe not so useful, maybe it is. We've got a little default volume that we can set here. So it gives them an indicator of where the default volume is. But when you restart the file or turn the system on and off, that will actually start the volume at that location. We can, of course, switch to our different modes directly from this little settings menu here. Of course, you can just drag your own controls over here if you want to. Now, we also have our little help desk here. So let's say the coffee's too hot. It's going to we get a little pop-up on the touch panel. You can see here I've got a little webhook we can jump over to. You can see there. Now this link in here, that will take you, whatever link you actually put in here, you put your webhook in here, and then your little link there, I've just got it going to reflect, but you could have it going to your actual site in there. And you can see here, let it cool down, and then if I bring this over so you can kind of see it, when I send that to the panel, we get a nice little pop-up on there. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Like I said, there's a lot of code going on behind this, so you're really going to need to understand Lua if you're going to use this out in the wild. Obviously, we won't be able to support it or anything like that, so it's totally use at your own risk. Like I mentioned earlier, if there's anything you find, feel free to post it on communities, and if I can get to it, I will. And yeah, hope it's of some use and you have a bit of fun with it, and good luck.